I'm going to dive straight in with the biggest question of all. How how optimistic are you for RAF Rugby going into the new year?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. We've made some changes across the board in the coaching setups. In the women's side, with Sean Williams coming in the men's side with Tom Gardner taking over for the men's team, and then Richie Craig going into the vet side as the head coach. So we've got some changes across the board, as I say. But yeah, really optimistic, and everybody's looking forward to it. People, Justin Coleman, who was our head coach of the men's last year, for instance, he's gone into assistant director of rugby working with me. So we've got some continuity there and some experience, and we've got some good coaching setups together.
Was it a mixture of people's time, or in terms of when people's natural time in a role finishes and then they decided to do something else, or was it a conscious decision to make changes, or a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination, really, and then trying to get a foundation, some support from above, which has been really good from the RAF RU exec and from the RAF wholesale, and then with those people, just manipulating a few positions so we can get a more strength and breadth throughout the management and support to that. So yeah, a little bit across the board and a bit of mixture of both.
Well, we'll start with the men's side first. What are you starting to see changes come into effect already?
Yeah, so the game plans, I'm seeing them already against Rams Rugby. Unfortunately, we had a Leicester Lions fixture that was cancelled due to the weather just before Christmas. But we're seeing some changes in the way they're set up, in the way they're playing. Not drastic changes, but just a little thought process being slightly different and approach slightly different. But again, that freshening up sometimes can be a good thing. They say on rotation that coaching staff around about 4 to 5 years, and then to freshen it up, different voices. Then some can stay, and they have done, and then some additional. But there's different changes, and those changes are coming through quite nicely at the moment.
It's easy to, when you just look back at the results from last year, in case of going, well, the RAF had 2 losses from the 2 games, but that completely overlooks the fact that there were 2 very close games for long periods.
Yeah, we have to look at, as you say, they were close games for long periods, and it's how getting that little bit, the final bit over the line, and then getting a win in there, which is really important, obviously. Play to compete, pay to win. But there was shoots definitely there, and some progression that had been made from previous years, and it was developing. To take it on to the next stage, you're looking at something slightly different for the men, and then looking at how we develop that and get that next stage, those couple of inches more that we need just to get over the line. It was the sort of emphasis, and they were close games, and there's a bounce of a ball here, there's maybe a decision here and there, and then it can go either way. But the Army was strong at Gloucester, definitely, and the Navy are always powerful and strong and always wanted to compete, as they always have been.
What are the main challenges that the men's team have in terms of when you're building up towards inter service? Is it prep time? I think we know outside the military, there's this common understanding of just how committed the RAF is in terms of operations and things like that. Are you coming up against that as well? Is it combination of service size? What are those challenges that you need to overcome?
I think some of the challenges on the pitch are availability. Again, and we've got great support from the RAF and the exec, but the players equally want to have a primary role. They want to have a career, but they want to play rugby as well. Some at very high levels, obviously, and some that are in the community game that want to be able to have the best of both worlds as such. And I don't blame them for that, but the focus on their career is something that's really important to them now. So getting that balance, but as you say, globally, we're engaged, obviously, being as expeditious as we can be with aircraft and in support of operations and exercises throughout the world, supporting all 3 services, and humanitarian aid where required. That's part of our role, our day-to-day role. So getting a balance of that, but then getting out teams that can get the strength and conditioning done, play some rugby, and have that continuity on the field, balanced with what they have to do off the field, is a hard task for the players, the management, and the support we have from the Royal Air Force. It really adds to it.
But does it make the rugby all the more important then, in terms of giving them that focal point, maybe away from work pressures and something to build up towards?
Definitely a focal point away from work pressures, and again, as we know, mental well-being, physical well-being through sport, etc., is high on the agenda, and so it should be, because it's proven. But I think as well, when you're away, even if you're not involved in the games, and you're not a rugby player or an athlete or involved in RAF Rugby Union at all, that inter-services focus and it being televised and can be watched throughout the world. The amount of people that get back in contact with us afterwards or ask us about when the games are coming up, it shows that it's a broad brush. It's not just the people involved in the game on the day or at the stadium, it's those that are deployed around the world.
From the women, I think, it's almost, is the challenge slightly different in that, when you've got a squad that is as strong as it has been in the last few years, getting over the line?
Yeah, and they have got over the line in the past. And again, there's some changes in the management structure and the coaching structure in the women. And we've brought in some people that are experienced in that. And obviously, John Wilding, the former head coach of the women, had done fantastic work in world rugby for the women's game and definitely for the Air Force. He's a great ambassador for the Air Force in rugby. Bringing Sian Williams in, who's been there, played for Wales, obviously, played 7s and 15 for Wales. And has got coaching pedigree and is already involved in UCAF women's setups. It just gives us a different focus with the players she's got to hand. But they've not rested on their laurels at all. They've gone looking for players and have been over the last few years to build a bit of depth, to build a bit of continuity, to add into what we've already got on elite athletes, such as Amy Cockayne and Sarah Bonners. So we're adding to those and then looking for the next generation of those. So we're not sitting on our laurels at all. And Sian's really having experienced the elite athletes scheme and being able to compete internationally. She's now bringing that sort of background with Chrissy Zixoa as the new director to then look at how we develop the game, not just on the pitch on those two games, but leading up to it and in the community game as well.
When you have the likes of Amy Cockayne and Sarah Bonner, you've mentioned them already. How much easier does it make it when you're then approaching potential new players, because there is that name recognition factor from people who they see on TV playing international rugby?
I think in the initial stages it's great, and I say they're fantastic ambassadors often on the field for Harlequins for Sarah and Scotland, obviously, and Amy for England and Leicester. They are fantastic advocates, but equally it can be a bit of trepidation from some of the players thinking they're going to go straight in and expect to compete at that level, and that isn't the case. It's about development. It's about moving people and actually using the experience and the knowledge of those players to actually be involved in an inter-services squad. And once the players come and settle in, we're not expecting new players into rugby or into the Air Force to set the world alight. What we're expecting them to do is learn, listen, and start to build themselves into potentially those next generation of internationals.
In terms of profile as well, Lucy Nye being picked as one of the faces of Premiership Women's Rugby this year.
Yeah.
Were you aware of it before that started doing the rounds on social?
I was sitting on RFU Council, etc. I was slightly aware of it, and it's a nice photograph that was put up at Twickenham when I saw it. So it's and in her uniform, fantastic. And Lucy has been worked hard, going down to Exeter, and has been working hard down there. He's a good player, obviously, but again, the profile and the dedication put into it to then move around into a different club to get a different opportunity to push herself to see how far she can go, definitely. But again, the amount of service people in women's Premiership Rugby is phenomenal and on the verges of it. We just obviously need to keep finding the next generation, because as the game grows in that format and in that sphere, then we need to make sure we're amongst that.
In terms of Sian and appointing her as head coach, how easy was it for you?
Very. I've watched Sian because she was assistant coach for John recently. I've seen Sian when I was director of UCAF Rugby. She did the sevens down at Bournemouth with us. Very, very good, very well delivered, very well measured, and very experienced.
And in terms of taking that step up though from being an assistant to a head coach is really tough, regardless of whether you're a club. It's the same as getting a promotion at work, isn't it? What kind of support are you being able to offer her in terms of taking that step up?
Well, I think first of all, for myself personally, I speak to her regularly. and then just find out where she is, what her thought processes are, how she's looking to play, how she's going to utilise what she's got on the playing field. But equally, and moreover, Chrissy Zixoa and the management group around her are experienced. They've been there, seen it, done it at playing wise and as a management wise. So they have a really good sort of foundation there for her to be able to go and work and take all the as you know, the background noise as a head coach with either kits, media, travelling, logistics, everything comes in through a head coach, and there's a decision to be made. But if they can take some of that away, which they, through their experience, that's releasing Sian off to then do what she does very well in the coaching aspect.
Put your UCAF hat back on for a second, and sticking with the women, having the International Defence Rugby Cup in England in September. What's the potential for that, for the impact to have across military rugby here?
Across military rugby, huge. Across rugby as a whole and women's rugby, I know that obviously ticket sales have gone on, and the ticket sales have been very good already. So there's an interest in the World Cup, but then that on the back of that, the IDRC, women's IDRC for the Rugby World Cup for the military, that just shows people that there is an opportunity to compete at international level. And be it UCAF, be it single service, that opportunity to filter through. And the women's game is developing all the time. Technically, it's a very, very good game, and it's very entertaining. And it's an exciting game, and everybody is gearing towards it throughout the country. But the military are emphasising that, and then making people aware of the availability to go and watch some really high standard of rugby against some international opposition. Because some of the international opposition in the IDRC is very, very good from the Southern Hemisphere especially. So I think that highlight, and then the opportunity for people to realise that rugby is a sport they still can get involved in with the skill sets of maybe netball players for the hand skills, the sprinters, the athletes. Actually, there's an opportunity, something slightly different that they might be able to develop into.
It's and this may sound like a related but also a little bit of a random question, is that, the international, the representing your country on the international stage, obviously, yourselves and the Army and the Navy all play your French counterparts each year. But because it's generally so close to inter-service, it does tend to get overlooked a little bit, even though you're playing international opposition. Is it something that we don't make enough of, do you think, in terms of that ability to play against other nations?
I think it peaks and troughs a little bit. I think depending when the Navy had a little altercation down in Toulouse not long ago, then it obviously became high profile, and then everybody wanted to go watch. There's a big crowd the following year. I was down there watching myself. And then the Army, the same. The Air Force possibly will look to move our fixture away from inter-services and put it to a different time of year to give it some more sort of prominence in the rugby calendar. Whether the Army and the Navy do that as well, I'm not sure. But I think it's very important. It's with UCAF men's first team playing Germany this year, the German national side, Gloucester. I think there's more to be made of that, and they played Poland the year before. The women's UCAF have been playing, but now it comes into single service. The single services, I think, will start making more of that, because it is an international rugby fixture and it should be recognised as such.
And feeding into the Masters, and I think you've touched on the mental well-being already for players, and how important it is for the younger teams. For the Masters, does it kind of almost get magnified in terms of that well-being, that support network for people who are a little bit older?
Yeah, so obviously into the Masters, there's again really prominent in the last week or so was Steve Worrell, the ex-head coach of the Air Force, who sadly passed away just around New Year. Fantastic advocate for vets rugby and all rugby across the Royal Air Force, and played at every level. But that's the part where they have the conversations. The rugby doesn't finish when you stop playing, and there's, whether you coach or whether you get involved in strength and conditioning management or anything else, that mental well-being, that togetherness, that sort of bond that you have as a rugby player or as a service person, that remains. And I think that's really fundamental. And even past the vets, as you'll see in the past games, the crowd on the Friday evening at Gloucester last year was lots of vice presidents, lots of people that have had a rugby shirt on, an Air Force rugby shirt or an Army rugby shirt, that have left the service many years ago. But it was a big event, and the crowd was good, and the crowd will be good again this year at both events. But as you say, mental and physical well-being and getting together and then checking on your buddy and looking after your oppo is a definite thing, and that it comes from Masters rugby on the field because they've all known each other for a long, long time. They may have played in the service as seniors and under 21s, 23s together. And that's definitely been the case. But then it goes into what happens after you stop playing or stop coaching, but you still definitely, through service rugby, have an involvement.
And just a quick final one. Just looking back to the under-23s, and you were on co-commentary on BFBS for the Army game. How did you enjoy that experience?
Well, it was a little. So I did the UCAF commentary pitch side at Gloucester the week before, which was fairly warm and comfortable. -3 at the other side of the field in the Cotswolds was a little bit different, but all enjoyable all the same, because such enthusiasm and skill set and ability from the players, and it just shows the next generation of rugby player throughout the services. I went down to Portsmouth for obviously the Navy game, and I saw the Army Navy game online as well. So it just shows there's a continuity, there's an ability there, and that the professional game is no wonder that they come and have a look from sort of Nat1 Championship, Premiership to have a look at those games. And there's a desire to win, there's a desire to represent your service, as all 4 teams do, 23s, vets, women's and men's. They all do. And it's really important to the players on the field, but it's quite surprising when you go broader in the services how important it is to the broader services.
In terms of, and we'll just wrap up in terms of just with a quick final look at 2025 IS overall, how do you see it going this year?
I think it's going to be a strong competition again, as it always is. I think the Army built through Tim last year, built really well and sort of executed, as you would say. The Navy, either playing or coaching, they're always there or thereabouts. They have some really good players, some really talented players, but they always produce great backroom staff, so they'll always be strong. The RAF, yes, we are in a building process. However, that sometimes is a benefit, because again, some players will be going into the unknown, and coaching staff that are not new into it because they've been around the game for a long time and played and coached as assistant coaches, etc. But they will give a good account of themselves. Everybody does. There's a pride in the service and a pride in the shirt they wear. So it's always going to be interesting and well worth the watch.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask you one final question, just separately, because we're on the verge of doing the announcement for the Northampton game.
Yeah.
In terms of how exciting is it for from the RAF's perspective to be moving away from, well, not that sounds like I'm doing Plymouth a disservice, but how exciting is it to be moving to a ground like Franklin's Gardens with a pitch like that, and almost the expectation that comes with playing at a venue like that?
I think we're going back to maybe 2018, where we played the Royal Navy at Harlequins at the Stoop, and then we played at Gloucester. And I think having those games at Premiership grounds is great. It's fantastic. Northampton, I think, is really sort of prominent with the Mobs Memorial being there. I know it's Army related, but again, it's still a service person and it's still a service link. Sam Matavesi, having played at Northampton recently in the Premiership, but going back to Steve Worrell again, that I mentioned earlier on, he played at Northampton as well. So for this year, it would be really poignant for that, and coached there many times as well when I was coaching with him. So I think an awesome stadium, a great stadium. I know the Northampton public will get behind it, and I think we'll have a good crowd for that game, as the one at Gloucester continues to grow as well. So 2 Premiership grounds is really fitting for service rugby.